Good morning, friends. Let's go ahead and begin with a prayer today. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, and our beloved Guru, Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, humbly we bow to Thee. Guide us ever homeward, that we may feel Thy loving presence. Help us to pass through moments of darkness, through moments of light, ever moving towards Thy joy, resting within. Om, peace, Amen. Our topic for today is on the quality of security. And so our chant is, Lord, when in darkness, Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, always I'll follow Thee. Where does our true security lie? This is the question that we will be exploring and asking ourselves today. If I grieve or lose my way, only Thou can comfort me. All I live for is to love Thee, my eternal friend. Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, always I'll follow Thee. Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, always I'll follow Thee. If I grieve or lose my way, only Thou canst comfort me. If I grieve or lose my way, only Thou canst comfort me. All I live for is to love Thee, my eternal friend. All I live for is to love Thee, my eternal friend. Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, always I'll follow Thee. Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, always I'll follow Thee. If I grieve or lose my way, only Thou canst comfort me. If I grieve or lose my way, only Thou canst comfort me. All I live for is to love Thee, my eternal friend. All I live for is to love Thee, my eternal friend. Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, always I'll follow Thee. Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, always I'll follow Thee. If I grieve or lose my way, only Thou canst comfort me. If I grieve or lose my way, only Thou canst comfort me. All I live for is to love Thee, my eternal friend. All I live for is to love Thee, my eternal friend. All I live for is to love Thee, my eternal friend. This chant leads us so beautifully into Swami Kriyananda's commentary on the topic of security. All I live for is to love Thee, my eternal friend. Our true security doesn't lie in outward things, it lies in God alone. And so let's begin by reading the commentary that Swami Kriyananda shares in his book, Affirmations for Self-Healing. Man struggles all of his life to store up treasures for himself, to ensure his property against loss and his health against the devastations of disease. He rests his faith in outward measures and sees not that such faith is like asking a wave not to move. Security is his alone whose faith rests in the Lord. Most practical of men is he who offers his life to God, praying, "My safety is thy responsibility, Lord." This does not mean that we should not be conscientious, but after doing our very best, we should leave the worrying to God. He ends that commentary, "We should leave the worrying to God," with an exclamation point. And punctuation is always so important. It tells us, and particularly for Swami Kriyananda, who in his writing, he was not overly effusive with punctuation and things like that. I love a good exclamation point. I use them often. And it was actually one of my co-workers at work where at a high school where I work as an English teacher, a fellow English teacher, who said, you should reserve your exclamation points for those really important moments, those moments you really have something to say. And I find in Swami Kriyananda's writing that he also does that. He reserves an exclamation point for those moments when he's trying to convey something or he wants to convey something much deeper, much more important. He wants us to pay attention. And so for him to end that line with an exclamation point, "Do your best, then leave the worrying to God." It's the essence of the lesson that we're being offered here with this affirmation on security. And it immediately made me think of where worrying comes from. The act of worrying is actually rooted in the ego. It's rooted in that desire to hold on to something that we don't have or that we want to keep. It's rooted in the need or the delusion that we need something in order to make us feel happy or safe or comfortable. It comes from exactly what Swami Kriyananda advises against in his commentary on security this week. It comes from the belief and the trust that our happiness lies, that our safety and security lies in those external things, those things that are outside of us. And immediately I thought of the quote from Lao Tzu, who is an ancient Chinese philosopher who is the author of the Tao. And he says that if you are depressed, I've always loved this quote, if you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the present or in the future. And if you are at peace, you are living in the present. And this is, of course, where we want to be. We want to be at peace, living in the present moment. But how do we get there? What does that look like? It's the advice Swami Kriyananda gives us. Give your faith to God. Offer everything that you are to God. Put your trust and your faith in the divine. And so what does that actually look like for us on the path as we're moving? The first metaphor or image that came to my mind was the idea of a stream. Life is like a stream. It's a river flowing, and there's always obstacles and sediments and banter and just things that are getting in our way. And here we are. Maybe we're just a tall blade of grass in the middle of that stream. And life's river is just constantly flowing and moving, and we're progressing along with it, and it's bringing us these challenges and these obstacles. And if we're a stark, strong, solid, immovable reed poking up out of that water, the more that current banters against us, the more that current pushes us, instead of being malleable and being able to bend, we ultimately end up breaking. The current becomes too strong. If that boulder or that rock that the stream is or the river is pushing down towards us hits us head on, and we're not malleable in the midst of that, then we break. And in a certain way, this is the metaphor for our security. If we are so deeply rooted in the feeling that our security has to come from somewhere outside of us, if I can just get enough money into my savings account or my retirement account, if I can just get a big enough house to keep my family safe, if I can just pay off my house, these are material things. If I could just get the right car and or make the right amount of money or get the right job, then I'll feel safe. Then I'll feel secure. And that's the first layer. of the material world, the material security that we want to have around us, the right amount in our savings account, the right amount on our paycheck, the right home that we're paying off and that are at the right mortgage rate, and all of these things. And then there's that second layer of security, the people that we have in our lives. If my partner will just love me enough, if my children will just be, the example and the model that I want them to be in the world. And so then our security takes that second layer, which is a little bit more esoteric. It's the people that we have in our lives, the love that we want to feel, the relationships and the closeness that we want to have with other people. And that security, it just continues to layer outward. And we keep reaching further and further outside of ourselves for that sense of security. We're like that reed. If a relationship and a loving relationship only looks one way to us, if that act of love, of showing love and sharing love, only manifests in one direction, and I get stuck in my mind and my ego says, this is what true love looks like, this is what my security looks like if I know that my partner loves me and they do all of these things, or my children act just this way, then we're that reed that's strong and rooted and immovable. And when life's waves come crashing down, when those boulders and those sediments come pushing against us, we break. But if we're like a blade of grass that's malleable and that's moving, that's dancing along with the current, and that can move and move and dance around all of the sediment, all of the boulders and the rocks that are coming tumbling down that river, then we are able to cooperate with divine grace, and we are able to cooperate with our sense of security. And we are free and we are fluid. We're living in the present. We're at peace. We're not anxious about the future. We're not depressed or nostalgic about the past. We're right here living in the present moment, listening for what Divine Mother is offering to us, or watching for what Divine Mother is sending down that river. Sometimes it's a big boulder and it's an obstacle that we have to jump over, or we have to move ourselves and shape ourselves around, like that blade of grass. Or I had the pleasure of just spending a couple of days out on the coast, and it was in a very quiet little town where there wasn't really much to do but go for long walks along the ocean. And I was just watching. I spent a lot of times just watching the waves and watching the seaweed and all of the sediments and just the rocks and the boulders, and how everything just molded around the ocean waves. And it was all so fluid, and it was moving back and forth, and just, allowing the ebb and the flow of the tide and of the waves. Sometimes the waves would come crashing in, and other times they would just come sprinkling or trickling along on top of the rocks. But everything that was in the ocean, everything that was there, it was just dancing along with that ebb and flow. And the more that we can act that way, the more that we can get out of that rootedness of, this is what my security looks like. This is what true protection looks like in my life. And again, it manifests for us in our bank accounts and in the home that we have, in the family, the way that our family is going to act, in the family that we're raising. But people are unpredictable. Life is unpredictable. Our security can't rest in those external things alone. And if we're not listening, if we're not malleable, if we are solid and strong and too deeply rooted, and we don't have space for that flexibility, then we end up getting lost. And sometimes what happens is we miss the divine grace that's always trying to shower down upon us. We miss that opportunity. So much of what Swami Ananda talks about in his commentary for this week on security lies in faith. What are we putting our trust and our faith in? Is it those external things? Is it that bank account, the number in that bank account, or the size of that house, or the mortgage rate that we've gotten, or the paycheck and the job security that we wanted? Or do we have faith in Divine Mother, in God's divine friendship, in God's divine loving hand that's always guiding us? Doesn't mean that things are always going to be easy, but do we have faith, and are we able to listen? Because if ever we are being faced with a challenge in our life, you can guarantee that Divine Mother is there whispering for us and guiding us along that journey, asking us to raise our own consciousness to meet those tests, which is, of course, what we want to do. A simple and easy life isn't going to bring us the self-transformation that we're seeking as spiritual seekers, as truth seekers. We want to transform the ego Don't worry. Leave the worrying to God. Don't live in the past. Don't live in the future. Live right here in the present moment with everything that Divine Mother can offer us. And again, as I said, then Divine Mother opens up channels that we never even dreamed possible. I had this experience myself about 2.5 years ago now. I needed to buy a new car. And I, just like Swami Kriyananda's advice, be conscientious. I looked at my budget, I looked at all of my bills, and I said, okay, this is how much I can make in a monthly payment that's going to allow me to be secure and safe and continue to live my life in all of the ways that I need to. So I was looking at what is safe, what is secure for me, and I was being conscientious, and I said, this is the number that I can afford in a monthly car payment. And so I started looking at different cars and, of course, finding how much of a down payment am I going to need in order to meet this number that I wanted to meet in order to help me to feel safe and secure. Where does my security lie? In this case, I was being conscientious of my bills and of my monthly budget. And I just didn't quite have enough money for a down payment for the car that I wanted, the car that I thought would be the right car for me, that would provide the right kind of longevity. And so I just sat and prayed and thought, what am I going to do? Where's the money going to come from? Should I be taking it out of my savings account? Just looking at different things like this. And but I never got attached to it. And I just kept saying to Divine Mother, okay, if this isn't the car, then we'll just have to go back and look at a different car. Or if my monthly budget is supposed to change and I need to take something else away, show me what I need to take away. Again, looking at that sense of safety, that sense of security, money being so deeply rooted in that. For so many of us, money offers such a sense of protection and security. It's one of those biggest delusions that we just hold on to and grasp onto because of course, we need a flow of income in the world in order to interact with it. The world runs on money in a certain sense, but we don't have to engage in it and attach to it the same way. So at any rate, I was praying and listening and deciding, and suddenly, through channels that I never would have thought possible, I was offered an opportunity to help somebody out. I was actually helping someone. They needed me to help them with something. And so I was able to say yes to that and provide for them something that they needed. And as a result, I was paid a little bit of money. So I had a little bit more that I could put toward my down payment on my car. And then suddenly another channel over here, something came through, somebody gave me a gift, and I was able to put that in a little bit more. And suddenly, over the course of about 2.5 weeks, the amount that I needed in order to feel safe and secure with the monthly payment that I was willing and able to pay, not only did I meet that through divine grace, but it actually was exceeded. So that monthly payment that I have on my car, it actually was able to go down a little bit more. And if I had been rigid and stuck and rooted and just said, no, I have to find this, where's the money? It must come from outside. And if I had just been worried and anxious and what am I going to do, and walked away from the process and maybe said, I don't even know what to do. I can't even buy the car. I can't get the car I want. I'm done. If I had been rigid and stuck, then all of these little battles, they would have just broken that reed. I would have been that reed that's just too deeply rooted and stuck, but instead being malleable, praying, listening. What are you trying to tell me? When a little bit of an obstacle comes, we just dash and we ebb and we flow and we allow those obstacles and we mold ourselves around them and we allow those obstacles to flow by and to float by. And on the other side was divine grace. On the other side was those gifts that Divine Mother was offering. And that's where our true security lies. In this case, that example manifested in the outer amount of money that I needed, but it doesn't always look that way. Divine Mother's grace, divine grace that's flowing down to us, if we're listening for it, divine grace asks us to reach up to it. It's not that it just sits there and hands it to you. It asks you to pray. It asks you to listen. It asks you to be aware of all of what is happening around you, of lifting your consciousness up to meet it. And when we can share in that, when we can offer our security, offer our worries, offer our joys, offer everything that we have into the divine, then the Divine Mother, then the divine grace, that divine grace is right there, ready and willing to jump in and to help us. But what it comes back to more than anything else is that ability to share what we have with God, to know that everything that we are given is a gift from the divine. Swami Sri Yukteswar, who was Paramahansa Yogananda's guru, he said that as long as we are breathing the free air of earth, we are obligated to render grateful service. And what does that mean? There's heavy words in there, obligated to render. Anytime someone hears the word, you're obligated to do that, our ego wants to rebel. But what we're being asked to do is render grateful service, is to share our gratitude by sharing all that we have, by offering that expansive heart into Divine Mother, into that flow of grace. Then suddenly we're no longer attached to the external outcome, but what we rely on, what we feel, is the sweetness of the relationship with Divine Mother. And this is something that our guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, he displayed so beautifully, this sweetness of this relationship that exists between the devotee and Divine Mother. Being a devotee of Divine Mother, in that sense, one of my favorite stories is a story that takes place in a little beach town called Laguna Beach. And Yogananda was driving up from, it's about halfway between Los Angeles and San Diego. And Encinitas and Los Angeles were the two places where Paramahansa Yogananda spent most of his time working and offering the teachings. And so this little beach town halfway between these two big cities, one day Paramahansa Yogananda was driving back through this little beach town, and he got the inspiration, or the thought came, there was a little bakery that he loved, and they had wonderful shortbread cookies. And he said to the disciples in the car, he said, let's stop here and get some shortbread. And so they stop at the bakery, and he gets out of the car and he goes in to order the shortbread. Or I think one of his disciples goes in to get the shortbread, and the disciple comes back out and he says, there is no more shortbread. The woman that ran the bakery said, oh, I only have this one batch left, and I'm saving it for somebody else. And so they get back in the car, and Yogananda prays to Divine Mother, and he says, why did you put the thought in my head to stop and to get shortbread cookies? Why did you bring that thought into my mind if there was no shortbread there? And it's such a beautiful response, because there's no outer attachment to the actual treat, to the delight in eating and enjoying the sweet. There was no anger and there was no ego involved. It wasn't that his happiness was wrapped up in taking a bite of that delicious cookie and that delicious treat. It was, oh, Divine Mother, why did you even put this thought into my head? Cooperating with grace in its most simplistic essence, listening to Divine Mother, and then offering that up. Even the thoughts in our head come from Divine Mother. So of course everything is offered right back up to her in sharing, to render grateful service. And then in response to that, Paramahansa Yogananda, he's just listening and asking, and then the woman comes running out of the bakery, and she has a bag of shortbread cookies, and she says, I was saving this last batch of cookies for someone else, but they're coming later, and I can give them more, and I can bake them more. In the meantime, I want you to have these cookies. And then they take the cookies out, and they're eating them, and they're enjoying them, but it had nothing to do with the outer enjoyment. It had nothing to do with the pleasure that was rendered from the taste of the cookie, the delight of the cookie. When Paramahansa Yogananda was enjoying that shortbread cookie with his disciples, he was enjoying it with God and for God and through God. And this is the essence of what we have an opportunity to do as we're practicing, living in the faith that Divine Mother, that the Lord, that God is going to give us everything that we need. If we can just slow down and we can listen for the answer, if we can be flexible and malleable, not getting stuck in our head, rooted in that place of thinking, this is what I need, this is what outer security looks like, this is where my happiness lies, in the paycheck, in the job, in the house, in the family that we need, in the relationship that we have. If we're able to just flow into a spirit of giving and of offering, then the law of abundance, you see, we think the law of security is rooted in materialism because we live on the material world, and that's what our culture teaches us. The more that you have, the bigger you have, the more that you can stockpile things, right? More, bigger, better, stronger. That's going to bring you happiness. That's going to bring you security. And we get stuck in that because delusion draws us into it. And we think, yes, of course, more is better. But those laws, that law of materialism, the law of consumerism that just spirals around and around, it keeps us trapped on the hamster wheel. There are much subtler laws that are working all of the time that we are in tune with, and they are divine laws, the laws of prosperity and the laws of abundance. And the way the law of abundance can work for us, when we open our hearts in gratitude, when we open our hearts in a desire to share everything with Divine Mother. When something doesn't go our way, to ask, what's happening here? Where did this thought come from? Why did you lead me down this path? If that wasn't the answer, where is the answer? What's the solution? The more that we can keep that open dialogue and that context with Divine Mother, sharing everything, even our thoughts, even the passing thoughts that come through our mind, we share them with Divine Mother and we offer them back up to Divine Mother, then we're working with a subtler law of abundance. We're working with the subtler law of prosperity. And these divine laws, they are the true security that we have. That relationship with Divine Mother, that is where true security lives. It doesn't lie in the laws of consumerism and materialism and external happiness, though we get confused and we think that they lie there. But our faith and our trust must lie in those subtler laws of abundance, of prosperity, of love, of sharing, of generosity. And when we can live in that flow of magnetism, the more energy I put out, the more energy I magnetize back. The more I offer in abundance into the world, the more that abundance will come back. One more story that I'll share. I had a friend living up at Ananda village, and they came into some difficult times, medical issues and other things like that, that caused quite an anchor or a weight. It caused an issue for them financially for quite a while. And they sat down with some of their mentors up at Ananda Village, which is a small community. It was the first Ananda community up in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains, where many Ananda devotees live. And they sat down with their mentors, and they made a plan. And in this plan, a financial plan to get themselves out of debt and to get them back into a place where they were feeling secure financially. And the first thing that their mentors did when they sat down with my friend and this couple, my friends, was say, okay, where can we give more money? How much are we tithing? Can we continue to tithe? Don't take your tithe away. Where else can you offer money? And they advised them, anytime somebody sends out a note asking for help financially, offer a little bit. You don't have to give $500 every time, but offer a little bit of money into that. Share. Start that flow of sharing. Start that flow of giving, of offering, because the law of abundance and prosperity, the law of magnetism, it can't fail. It's a divine law, and it's where our faith lies. So we think, no, I'm in debt. Let me hold on to and hoard all of the money and income that I make. And the advice in this case was, no, just give, create a flow, and be conscientious, as Swami Kriyananda offers us. You don't just give everything away on a whim, but enter into that spirit of prosperity and abundance and giving. Give your energy to everyone around you, and then that energy gets magnetized back. These are the laws that we should put our faith in. This is where our true security lies. It's not in outward things. Our security lies in God alone. Move all ye mountains that stand in my way. Nothing can stop my progress. This is a sweet children's song that Swami Kriyananda has in his children's songs. Of course, they're written for children with sweet melodies, but the lessons in them are deep. Tall trees fall aside. Every bramble I slash with the sword of freedom. Every bramble I slash with the sword of freedom. We enter into every material circumstance, every outer circumstance in our life with that sword of freedom in our hand, knowing that delusion is here. The bramble of delusion is all around us, and all we need to do is slash through it. Move all ye mountains that stand in my way. Of course we have the power to move mountains, because divine law doesn't have to play by the same rules of the material world. Divine law is God's grace flowing down through us, and all we have to do is lift our consciousness up into it to be a part of that flow. And prosperity, abundance, joy, security, it all comes back not to what we have materially, but to our love and our trust and our relationship and our faith with the divine. And when we're walking there, we're not depressed in the past or anxious in the future. We are at peace in the presence, in the stillness of Divine Mother's love. So let's repeat our affirmation for today. We'll do it 3 times. First, loudly, calling to mind all of our subconscious energy, all of our subconscious efforts, and let's really focus in with all of our willpower and energy to cast out the delusion of security, to know where our true security lies. So you can repeat this aloud with me if you feel to. I live in the fortress of God's inner peace. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. A little bit more quietly, closing the eyes and taking it inward, feeling it at the heart center. I live in the fortress of God's inner peace. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. And now taking a deep, conscientious breath and drawing our attention to the point between the eyebrows. Barely audibly, in a silent whisper, I live in the fortress of God's inner peace. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. Once more silently, with deep concentration at the point between the eyebrows. I live in the fortress of God's inner peace. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. And listening to Swami Kriyananda's prayer, I accept whatever comes, Lord, as coming from thy hands. I know that it comes in blessing, for I am thine, as thou art ever mine.